Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm going to review the film Supergirl. So Supergirl is the newest film from DC Studios, led by James Gunn and Peter Safran, the co-CEOs. They've kind of been doing this for a few years now, but they're really just getting started. And if you've been following this podcast for some time, you'll know how excited I was and how much I enjoyed Superman, James Gunn's Superman, to be very specific. And it's such an awesome, wholesome film that just delivered on everything I was hoping for out of it. It's very fun, and it's a great setup for the new DC cinematic universe that James Gunn is creating. And it's been about a year since that film came out, and Supergirl is the first new movie to come out since then from DC. Of course, you had a few TV shows that they've made for it, such as Creature Commandos and Peacemaker. And we're getting some more this year, like Lanterns, and the next movie will be Clayface. But right now, Supergirl is the first movie since Superman for this DCU. And I've been so excited for Supergirl for several reasons. One is that James Gunn has publicly stated many times that the screenplay for this movie is excellent. When he read it, he said it was excellent. He basically said that he had no immediate plans to make a Supergirl movie, but when he read the script that was made for it, it was so much better than he ever could have imagined it being, and so he greenlit the movie immediately. Not to mention that James Gunn has also been very adamant about the idea that he will not greenlight a movie for his DC universe until the script is ready. So that also just said to me, like, okay, not only is it like a really good script, but he actually thinks it's like really good enough that it's ready to go. Like, we're actually ready to make this movie. And that got me very hopeful that like the script was going to be amazing. And then another thing for this film is that it's an adaptation of a comic called Woman of Tomorrow. I read it a few years back, and it's really good, actually. The art style is super colorful and vibrant, and the tone is very much like True Grit, and just feels incredibly different from other types of superhero stories. It's very much at its heart a revenge story, a story about justice for, for something bad that happened to this little girl. And that's what this movie is kind of about, too. It's about Supergirl helping this young girl who is trying to get revenge on this guy named Krem, and she's kind of going on this adventure and trying to save her dog and stuff like that. And it's very easy to see why this would make for a compelling movie and why this is a good comic to adapt for one. So there's that. And it also just told this story that makes Supergirl feel like a very different character from Superman, in that she's been through a lot of trauma in her life and had a very hard, young life as a child. And so all of that made her a bit more jaded and gritty. And, contrasted to Superman, who's had this perfect life growing up, and he's, just become this wholesome symbol for what every bit of humanity should be. And meanwhile, Supergirl is kind of a representation of, like, she's a good person, she wants to be a hero, but she has a lot of baggage that she's carrying, and that makes her a lot less hopeful than Superman would be. And I think that makes for a compelling character. A lot of adaptations of Supergirl have made her just, like, exactly like Superman, and, and I think it's just really nice to see a contrast between the two, and I'm sure that'll be even better when we see them interact more next year in Man of Tomorrow. But then on top of all of that, this movie has Jason Momoa in his dream role as Lobo, and Lobo is just such a fun character. I'm glad he's in this movie. It has some very talented people involved, including Craig Gillespie, who did movies like I, Tonya, Cruella, and Dumb Money. Those were all very solid. And there were some things that made me nervous, though, to be honest here. One is that test screenings did not go great for it. I saw a bunch of reports that they were kind of middling. And another is that the trailers didn't really sell the film too well, in my opinion. It looked kind of like a Guardians of the Galaxy ripoff with the music and just like the overall vibe of it. And, it's like, oh, we have to save our friends, we have to save the galaxy. Like, and, it's very similar. Even though I read the comic, and the comic's nothing like that. The trailers itself made it seem like it would be just very much like James Gunn, recreating Guardians of the Galaxy for DC, and that just wasn't very appealing. Also, it didn't have anywhere near as much color as I wanted or expected for an adaptation of such a colorful comic. So, just a lot of things that to me also just kind of were going against my excitement for the movie, but I still remained very optimistic here. But even with all of those things aside, there was also a report going around that apparently this movie replaced its composer 3 separate times. And that's not like a terribly unusual thing. I mean, it sounds really bad, but that's not something that's like totally, like mind-blowingly rare in Hollywood. I mean, I've seen a lot of big films in the last like decade that have replaced composers. Usually it doesn't happen more than once though. Like usually like you replace the composer once, you keep the new one and that's fine. But like to do it 3 times like is a bit concerning. Like that's kind of to me a problem of like, okay, maybe you just don't have a clear vision. But even Superman last year kind of added a new composer to do a lot of additional material for that film, and I think that ended up being in its favor. And in this film, I would say that's also probably a favor because the score is pretty good. I mean, overall, it's not very memorable. The main theme is nice, though, and I wouldn't mind if they keep that in the future. But anyway, all of that was a bit of a sign that something was off with this movie. And once reviews came out, it basically revealed that nobody loved this movie. Similar to the test screenings, basically confirmed everything with the test screenings. Nobody loved this movie, and even though reviews are fairly mixed for it, like if you look on Rotten Tomatoes right now, I believe it's somewhere in the 50s, maybe like 55 or so, and that's pretty okay, but it's just a case where even though the reviews are pretty mixed, everyone can agree that it's very mediocre. Very few people said it was great. Very few people said it was terrible. No one's like really on either end of the spectrum. It's just kind of, everyone's in the middle. Everyone's just kind of like, it's a 5 out of 10. It's not very good. Just really not a special movie by any means. And I think it's a case where, now that I have seen the movie, of course, I do agree that is the case 100%. Like, and it's actually very frustratingly mediocre because it's the kind of mediocre where I don't even really have any passion towards the film. I don't really have a very particular stance on it. Like I can't really say like, oh my god, like it had a lot of problems, but I really enjoyed these things a lot that really like countered my issues, or it just wasn't like a movie that I can really have much of a debate with myself about. Thinking about what my opinion is, because everything about it, almost everything about it, is very okay, very middle of the road, just not very interesting, not very engaging, and that's kind of the weird thing about it. Like, this movie isn't very engaging. It's not a movie that really captured my interest at all, and that's totally not how it was reading the comic, so I don't know what happened here. It just feels like something went wrong creatively, that maybe there was a difference of opinion. I mean, I've seen reports on that too. I'm not really going to comment too much on that, because I don't really know how much of it's accurate. But even before hearing that, watching the movie, I was thinking to myself, like, this really does feel like a movie that had, like, creative differences or some kind of, like, reshoots or something that was just messing with post-production a bit. But it's really just a movie, though, that I can't say I found much offensive about it. There was nothing I truly hated about it, but there's also very little I walked away feeling positively about. And so it's a movie that I just can't really recommend in any capacity, because I just don't really feel like there's anything to recommend. So we'll see how long this review is. I really don't know how long I could talk about it, but I still want to get into it regardless. And some things I do like about this movie, to be clear, are Millie Alcock as Supergirl. I think she's going to be really good in the future and is putting her all into this character. She's the easy highlight of this film, and she has a nice emotional center that makes you care about her and understand what she's going through. You want to see her succeed. You want to see her come out of this okay. And I think she does a really good job as the character. I mean, I think that they really nailed the casting on that. I also like Jason Momoa as Lobo. I mean, it's kind of a given because he's just cool and, he's awesome, even though he's basically just playing Jason Momoa, but I really enjoyed the character. I will say, I don't really think Lobo had any reason to be in this movie, like, just from a writing perspective. Maybe it was in the script initially, but I just feel like they kind of removed any reason for him to feel, like, relevant to the story at all. He just feels like he's there, like he's just kind of fan service. He doesn't really feel like a character as much as he is just like a comic relief. So that was disappointing, but I mean, he is one of the best parts of the movie, so I guess I can't really complain too much. But that was something I did notice. And I think this movie does have some really great scenes in it and ideas where you can kind of see what could have been here. And I don't know this for a fact, but I heavily suspect that the script was good initially. Like, I don't believe James Gunn would have been that confident in the script in this state. Like, the way this script looks in this movie, I don't believe he would have greenlit it. I think something happened in production or post-production that made it look a lot worse than it is because stuff was cut out. Like, I've seen a lot of people calling this movie out, like, oh, the writing's really bad, like, don't add any development. And I'm like, maybe that's kind of true, but also it's very clear a lot of that development was taken away. Like, it's very clear a lot was just removed from the movie. I'm not sure to what extent. It just really, I do not believe for a second, given how good some of the writing is in this movie, I do not believe for a second that the way the movie is right now is how James Gunn saw it when he read the script. I do not believe that at all. We'll see if something gets revealed in the future. I just think that, I think the writing definitely has some very strong moments, though, and the dialogue is very good in some scenes. But even some scenes I really enjoyed. Like, there's one great scene on Krypton where everything is getting destroyed, and you see how much Supergirl has lost growing up. That was very good. And you have several moments of really strong writing and dialogue that conveyed the message of the movie very well. And I think even some changes, I've seen a lot of people complaining about the changes it makes from the comic. Some of them I'm not big on, but there is one change by the end of the movie that I actually thought was a good choice and felt very relevant to the movie this was and like what they were trying to do with the characters and what their overall message was. I think that was a good choice, and I'll defend that choice when people see the movie. But really just surrounding a lot of that is a movie that doesn't seem to understand the source material and doesn't feel like it's made by someone who cared to understand it. It doesn't feel like it was made by someone who was really passionate about the comic and the character, the way James Gunn is, and was with Superman. It doesn't really feel like Craig Gillespie was feeling this movie, the same way other people did and really had the same connection to it that others do. I just don't really think he was the right choice to make this movie, and he makes some choices here that I just boggling, like mind-bogglingly weird, like the needle drops, the song choices, just some of them don't really add up. And he also made this movie like a post-apocalyptic, like Mad Max kind of vibe, when that's so far from what the comic is. And I understand some things like can be changed. I mean, even down to the villain Krem, like the design of Krem, he looks nothing like his comic book counterpart, like at all. Which I don't think is necessarily something that should be a deal breaker. Like, I don't think, the design of a character really makes or breaks the character. But, I mean, in the case of him, I didn't like the design at all. He was a terrible villain, and he wasn't threatening in the least. And again, with the world building, like the Mad Max vibe, it's just like, that's so far from what the comic was going for. It really just feels like he, read the script and just took his own version of it, didn't really look at the comic at all to see what the vision was for that, and then he just made his own thing. And I think this is a very good learning experience for James Gunn, because as a co-CEO, and he's in, creative control, he needs to learn how to tell people, like, listen, these are the things we need to keep like the comic, instead of just saying, yeah, do your own thing, like, let's just make your own movie, if you envision this, I trust you. He needs to be a little more strict, I think, with what he allows filmmakers to get away with in this world, especially when you have such a passionate audience who loves the source material too. I think they got to be a little more careful. But it's just a lot of things that were coming down to bad direction, I think, because I think that's also the case for the character Ruthie. I mean, Eve Ridley seems to do a good job. I don't think she was the problem here, but there's a lot of line delivery in the movie from her and others that didn't feel right to me given their dialogue, or at least it's not how I interpreted a lot of it during the comic and how I read it in my head. And I think a lot of it just felt kind of awkward to me. Like, characters were speaking very quickly, they weren't really letting it breathe, And again, I blame that more on the direction than the performances. I'd also say the movie's kind of visually uninteresting. There's just not a ton of color. The planets don't stand out much. And the visual effects don't look great in some scenes. I would actually say the third act of this movie has some really, really bad visual effects that, like, completely took me out of the movie. I was like, what? Like, this is not a 2026 blockbuster. Like, and it was kind of comparable to Black Widow, the third act from Black Widow. If you remember the CGI in that, like, that looked really bad too. This is pretty similar, maybe even a little worse if I'm being honest. It shouldn't be the case for this movie. I don't really know what happened. The budget seems like it was pretty big. So if those reports are true, I don't fully know where the budget went. Like, maybe it went to the design and the prosthetics and the alien designs. I don't know. I mean, those things looked good. The practical effects looked good. But some of the CGI is just really wonky. And I think they just should have done a much more straight adaptation of the source material in terms of the look and feel of it. Even the action isn't all that great to me. I think it's shot way too close up, and you can't really tell what's going on half the time. Like, there's this oneer it does where it's like it's trying to, or it's a fake oneer where it's not really cutting. But it just didn't look very good. It was just like, this is way too close. Like, I just can't really get immersed in this action sequence. It wasn't very interesting to look at. And as I kind of mentioned a little bit ago, there's a bunch of weird needle drops that didn't need to be there at all and took me out of the movie. One towards the end that I really feel bad for the singer, because a lot of people are really criticizing it and saying it's like one of the worst needle drops they've ever heard and it's just terrible. They're making memes out of it. I mean, like, let's be kind to the people. Like, it's not really the song's fault. It's not a bad song. It's just it didn't fit the movie. It didn't fit the scene. Again, bad direction. I don't really know what they were thinking with the song there. There were moments where I was like, okay, I kind of see what you were going for, but the movie's also just way too reliant on music in that way. Like, just use the score. Like, that was one thing Superman actually did really well, and that was impressive for James Gunn especially, because he is known for his needle drops. Like, Superman knew when to hold back on the music and just go all in on the musical score, like the instrumentals, let that take over. Supergirl does the opposite, and I don't know, maybe this is connected to the, replacing composers 3 times, that they didn't have enough time to really get more score out of it. But it just feels like they just were way too reliant on song choices, not nearly enough on the instrumentals, and it was distracting. I also think the movie is kind of weirdly edited. I can't say this for sure. It just kind of feels like a movie that was changed a lot in post-production after poor test screenings. I can't say to what extent, but it reminded me of movies I've seen that had a lot of reshoots as I was watching it. Like, and I'm not saying this is as bad as that movie, but it was reminding me a bit of the last Aquaman movie. That just felt very, like, weirdly edited and, like, felt like they were just trying to scramble things around a bit in post-production. Not a lot of people are probably going to really notice that or know what I'm talking about there, but that's just how I felt watching it. Even with all those negatives, though, I do want to be very clear. I don't think the movie is bad, necessarily. It's not good, but it has some things I enjoyed, and you can see the potential in it. You can certainly see the heart in the movie, but I also think that's what makes it such a big letdown. It just doesn't really do anything good enough to really stand out and justify its existence. It doesn't really feel like a movie I want to rewatch in any capacity. It's not a movie I really regret watching or, would say it's going to be on, like, my worst movies of the year or anything like that. Not at all. But I just really thought Supergirl could have been a very good, if not great, movie. And not only do I think it's a very mediocre movie, I think it's also just one of the most disappointing movies I've seen in a very long time, too. So, I'm going to rate Supergirl a C. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd and MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.